Galen, free will baffles me. Every time I think about what's free will, I turn myself in circles. I studied brain science and understand the closedness of the physical world, which seems to think everything is determined, and yet we have this internal feeling that I'm in control of everything. Anything I want to do, I can always do the opposite. So how do you see free will?
I would say there's a fundamental sense in which free will is impossible. And it doesn't make any difference whether the world is determined or not. It's impossible either way. At the same time, I think we can't help believing we've got it. So it's perhaps the most dramatic, irresoluble clash in the whole of philosophy, or indeed the kind of problems that...
I really want to explore that because I think that as crazy as that sounds, I think that may be right. So why do you think that? Because we certainly can agree on one side of the equation. We all feel like we have free will. If I want to move a finger this way or this way, and you tell me one way, I can do it the other, and I have total control of things. And you're saying it's fundamentally impossible. Why?
Well, here's an argument. You can tell me which premise, you tell me where you want to get off, but I'm going to give you the premises and then the conclusion. So first premise is, look, when we act, we do what we do because of the way we are, all things considered. Right. Premise one. Premise two. So, to be truly responsible for what we do when we act, we need to be truly responsible for how we are. Because you've already allowed that when we act, we do what we do because of the way we are. Step three. Well, but we cannot be ultimately responsible for the way we are. Conclusion, so we can't be free.
Okay, so I think the problem, if I would identify a problem, is in the first premise.
Okay.
So let's go through we do what we do because of what we are. Now, we traditionally say that what we are is a product of our genetic structure and our experience, and that leads to a process. But is not there and so if you just allow that premise, we do what we do because of what we are, then you do have, then your argument runs well. But there's another piece, and that is, it's not just what I am that makes me do, it's my consciousness, it's my experience, it's this internal volition that I feel that can vary my genetic or experiential, cultural pressures to do things. So I have this overriding capability to do whatever I want to do, this internal I, this unity that I feel, that can override, can supersede my genetics or my upbringing.
Well, I think you're probably right to get off at the first stop. But when I say we do what we do because of the way we are, I'm not just thinking about the genetic basis, which everyone agrees is pretty strongly influencing. Yeah. And then the early upbringing, which is also pretty strongly influencing. And so here's one point. Suppose you try to change the way you are at some point in your life. Well, the way you try to change yourself and the degree of your success in changing yourself will be a function of how you already are. So that's not going to work. But when I say you do what you do because of the way you are in a particular situation, I am factoring everything in. I'm factoring in all the thoughts, pro and con, that are going on in your mind, the whole complexity, and saying, but nonetheless, what you do in the end will be a function of how your total brain state is at that moment, including all your sense of being able to vary things.
So are you saying, therefore, that mentality is A, entirely physical, and then B, the physical world is an entirely closed system? Because if you have premise A and premise B, then that is a conclusion to your first premise. The mind is entirely material. The material world is entirely closed in terms of every event is caused by a prior event, and therefore everything we do is determined by our prior history. Is that your argument?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't need any of that. I'll give you an immaterial soul. I'll give you indeterminism. It doesn't matter. So, but you've just got to what I'm going to say is that is not going to help. So, suppose you've got a choice between A and B, and you're tending towards A, but you think maybe B would be better, and you're about. Suppose you're tending strongly towards A now, but in the end you do B. So, and suppose that was because there was an indeterministic event, a little random event that happened somewhere. Does that make you responsible for it?
No, I agree that indeterminism in terms of randomness
Yes.
is not free will. Randomness is not free will. And each event caused by prior events in a strictly materialistic way is not free will. Neither one
doesn't
of
have
those
to be materialistic. It could be. You could even have dualistic determinism. Anyway. But.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's how you define it. If you bring something else into mentality, a dualistic view, something that has the experience of consciousness, then because you don't know what that is, you can't restrict it in the same way you can the material world. Now, maybe that's cheating, but that's the reality. So I would agree that if materialism explains the 100% the mind, and if materialism is a closed system, which it seems to be.
I gave you everything. I gave you an immaterial soul.
Okay, now if you give me an immaterial soul, which I'm not saying I believe in, but if you give it to me,
just for the sake of argument.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I'm happy to have one. I wish I did. I don't think I do, but if I do, I'm happy with it. But if I have that, I don't even know what it is, and if it's immaterial, maybe it works by different principles, and it has some volitional aspect to it.
Sure, but I'm going to say, in the end, what you do flows from the way you are, even in your deepest spiritual characteristics. You've somehow got to get to be responsible for being the way you are, but you can't. You can't get back behind yourself in such a way as to be responsible for the kind of person you are.
So I can't.
Therefore, you can't be responsible.
I can't get out of that circle. I can't go back. But I think I can if you give me at that back part of your circle the some other element that is not caused by a prior condition.
Yeah, but then whichever way it goes, you've got to somehow have chosen it. But you can't choose it unless you already exist as a creature who has preferences. You can't, there's a two-word phrase, Latin phrase, you can't be causa sui, you can't be the cause of yourself. But you'd somehow have to get to be the cause of yourself to take fundamental, ultimate responsibility for yourself, and therefore for your actions that flow from the way you are.
And therefore free will?
Indeed, moral responsibility and free will.
And therefore we do not have free will.
Yes, that is my conclusion. And remember that it's an orthodox conclusion in Calvinism and Dutch Reformed Protestantism.
That may not cause that may.
No,
not
but what
I'm
saying is it's not necessarily an atheistic position at all.
No, sure, sure.
And even in Islam, what is written will happen. But having said all that. It is true, and you can show why we can't help believing we have free will in the strongest possible sense. And that is the world we actually live in, the world in which we cannot help believing in it. And is it an illusion? Well, in some sense, yes, but it's an illusion that just doesn't really touch us. The reality is that we live in a world where we experience having true free will and moral responsibility.
When in reality, real reality, we do not.
I think you can't escape that conclusion.